All right, Cory, we're going to start with the fly rods here. Getting rigged up for Southeast Alaska. Maybe talk to me a little bit about coho fishing or king fishing. Where should we start?
Cohos are kind of our most popular fishery around here. Being the little hatchery enhanced run, they are plentiful. People can fill their freezer, so the sting of a new fly rod doesn't hurt as bad.
Yeah, right. So you got Winston, you got Sage, you got Echo. Everything is about feel, response, connectivity. If you read any of the sort of advertising or stuff. So what do you think the difference between these rods is? What will people get in a Winston maybe over a Sage, or what do you got there?
Well, it's one of those things that obviously you get what you pay for. So kind of starting at the lower end, our Echo Ion comes in what we put together, the Alaska Ready package, and it's all about function. I've still got buddies that fish the Ion rod. Nothing special, but very durable. Not totally, not super, super powerful, not super sensitive, but it will get the job done.
Yeah. Echo, that's those are the Regiefs. And was it the older brother? That's like a fly, like one of the best, like a world-renowned caster.
Yeah, so...
And the younger owns Echo?
Yeah, Tim and Steve Rajeff. Steve is a rod designer for G. Loomis, and then Tim was the head designer for Echo. Very good casters and very good rods for the price point. I mean, there's TFOs, there's Reddington, there's a host of other lower end rods, but nothing can touch the Echoes as far as how they cast, how they feel, and how much they cost. So the Boost Blue is about $100 more than the Ion, and you get a lot more power. You get a little bit less swing weight, so it's good for people with older shoulders, tired shoulders, that sort of thing. They're not made in the U.S. I believe they come from Korea, where a lot of other manufacturers are.
Right.
Go ahead. Bumping up to the Sages, they kind of have their tiered series of rods. So the foundation is going to be the least expensive Sage rod, all still made in Washington down on Bainbridge Island. Nice feel, lightweight, not a ton of power. Once you bump up into their mid-level rods, the series splits. So you got the Sonic, which is more your freshwater kind of trout steelhead rod. And then you've got the Maverick, which is more your saltwater rod. I tend to like the Maverick better. I like a little bit faster action rod, and most of our coho fishing and king fishing for that matter takes place in the saltwater.
So I had a Sage 1 and then broke it. And then that was this last summer, and I sent it in, and because not only has the Sage 1 been discontinued, but its replacement has been continued. Do you know what the lineage of some of these rods is the Sonic or is the R8? That's kind of the top of the line Sage right now, right? Is that in the same lineage as the Z Axis or the 1, or is it its own thing? Or
so as far as the Sage flagship rods go, it was Z Axis 1, and the 1 was the first rod with the kinetic technology. Then it became the X, which is the Kinetic HD, and then the R8 followed the X, and the R8 was kind of unique in that it was the first Sage since the XP that used both new graphite and a new resin, and they're pretty special. Now that they have the R8, instead of having all the different series, they have kind of R8 series within a series. So we've got the R8 Salt, the R8 Core, the R8 Spey, and then new this year is the R8 Classic, which is more like a dry fly trout rod, slower action for people that don't want to be on the gas pedal just as much.
Yeah. I was down in California a couple of years ago, and my buddy had a X, It was a 10 weight, and we were going striper fishing. I thought, man, a 10 weight? That's going to be tough. But you could cast a long time double hauling big old huge flies for striper with a 10 weight. And I thought, that's nice.
Oh,
You
yeah.
did have to take some breaks after a little bit. But,
Yeah.
I mean, that is a 10 weight, and it's single-hander. But
Absolutely. And that's probably the best rod weight for our king fishery.
Hmm.
You know, you can get away with an 8, you can get away with a 9, but occasionally, you know, you're out there in the flats, you're out there in the channel, and like there are some decent sized kings that come back every so often. People get like 40 plus pounder.
oh, wow.
So
Nice. Excellent. So what about the two-handed rods? Is if you get a 10-foot, I have an Echo. Oh, what is it? It's a 1010 something. It's the Army blue. It's
the
not the Army blue. The
SR,
the Army. Yeah, the SR.
the old avocado rod.
Yeah, the avocado, the Army
Nice.
Jeep green. Love that thing. And it's really nice for some heavier patterns. And even though it's a 7 weight, it just seems like it's a little bit more bulked up. So when you're fishing for the kings around here, would like a 10 weight single-handed or an 8 weight switch work? Or do you need to have like a 10 weight switch or spay too?
No, you don't need to. It's all about how you want to use your 2-hand rod. The switch rods are popular, especially around here for steelhead fishing, because they make great indicator rods with that extra length. But you can also put a different spool on and then start throwing your Skagit setups and whatnot.
Mhm.
If you want to, you know, fish kings, like the limiting factor is going to be your fly size, how heavy of a fly you can toss. So you just need to keep that in mind. If you put say a 10 weight Titan long on an 8 weight switch rod, you'll be able to 2-hand overhead cast big flies,
Mhm.
but you're not going to be able to, you know, then throw like a 510 grain Skagit head and
Right.
cast the same fly and fish the same way.
Mhm.
They're versatile, but you know, they're still, you can put too much on the end of them and really struggle.
Gotcha. So you have this Sage R8 spay right here, and it says Skagit 500, 550 grain, or a Scandi 450, 500 grain. Is that like recommended, or is if you go beyond that or outside of that, it's just not gonna?
It's kind of the starting point. Everybody's casts are a little bit different. You know, some guys would pick up that rod and probably be more in like the 450 or 480 Skagit. I would probably be on the upper end. I tend to like a lot heavier line than I should. And, you know, for us in Alaska, Scandi casting is just not
Mhm.
really a thing.
Mhm.
You know, the flies are too big. It's more of an Atlantic salmon thing.
Right. Okay. What about care? So if you are fishing out in the channel, you're in the salt water, you rinse it every single day, or if you're going to go evening and then morning, you can maybe get away with every couple days rinsing it off with fresh water.
You know, it's kind of up to you. Keeping the cork dry or letting the cork dry out is the biggest thing. Personally, I don't rinse pretty much anything, actually. The nicer rod reel you get, the better the components and the more forgiving it is for poor maintenance.
Yeah.
Which is not an excuse, but you know, generally speaking, they last pretty well. The worst thing that I've seen happen is like you put a wet rod, whether it's fresh or salt water, away in a rod sock
Rod
in a
tube,
tube,
yeah.
and then you don't take it out till the next summer.
Yeah.
And the cork will be all moldy and slimy and gross. And
I've done that, and I didn't think it seemed like it was dry, but it was just damp. In Southeast Alaska, everything is just kind of damp, and it wasn't fully dry.
yeah,
And then the next spring I brought it out, and it was just, I had a little bit of just like, it looked like dust or something, like just like some
Yeah.
green dust. And man, it wasn't, it was more cosmetic than anything. It wasn't like ruined, but I thought that's horrible.
yeah,
And it was frustrating, but I should have known better. You just got to really, really dry it out inside for a while before you put it away for good.
yeah, absolutely. I'd say at least at the end of the season, you know, in season, you can kind of, I leave my rods strung up on the porch usually.
Mm-hmm. Ready to go.
Yeah.
So reels, how important are pairing reels with rods? I have this Lamson Guru and I absolutely love it. I had it was a 5. Well, I went with my 5 weight and I slipped on a rock and my hand went down. The hand was around the cork still and the reel just squared up this rock and it dented a little bit. Or like nicked it a little bit, but man, still just flawlessly worked. I thought, man, that's the difference between your $50 whatever reel and a reel that's going to be, at the time it was, I don't know, 200 or something like that. And now they're more expensive because that was 10, 15 years ago. But I thought, man, this is really well made. That's the difference between a cheaper reel and a more expensive reel. So importance with reel, if you're going to invest money, would you go rod? Would you go reel? And what are some of the reels that you have here?
Kind of depends on your target species. With trout and dollies, any of the smaller fish, you can get away with, less drag, not quite as nice of a reel. Generally, our cheapest reels, the Redington Behemoth is a great example. It is pretty heavy, but it's really strong drag for the price and just super functional. So that's the reel that comes on that Alaska Ready package with the Ion. The downside to it is it's still a cast aluminum reel. So corrosion, salt water, that is something that if you are not very good at maintaining gear like I am, that reel is not going to last very long.
Mm-hmm.
I had one, made it about a month, totally abused it, and it was totally my fault. You can get a couple years out of them, but that's about your like $150 price point. Once you're into a machined anodized reel, you're about twice that. So kind of $300 is the starting point for a reel that's going to hold up better in the saltwater.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're above 300, 5 and up, you're getting, made in the US, sealed drags, strong drags, lightweight, other features, but they're all fairly similar. I would say one of the most important parts of pairing a reel with a rod is how you like to cast and how it balances.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like to have their fly rod a little bit tip heavy. I would prefer to have the weight down by my hand and lighter tip. So, there are the Nautilus X-Frame, for example, is a super cool reel, super light. But on some rods, especially say you want a bead rod that is 9.5 or 10 feet long, well, that extra length is just going to counterbalance the lightweight and it's going to feel super heavy. So you'll want to kind of pivot and put a heavier reel on a longer rod.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually tell people if they're kind of on the fence, they don't have their mind made up about exactly what they want. First of all, come in, cast the rods, try some different lines, but then just put a bare reel on the rods and kind of see how it feels in your hand.
So you have the Echo Ion with the Redington Behemoth as your Alaska package here. And then above it, you have Lamson Guru on a Sage Maverick. Is that kind of a recommended pairing?
That's a good kind of, I would say that's getting into the mid to upper level rod package. That Sage Maverick is a really, really sweet rod for a lot of our coho fishing. And the Guru, like you said, just functions really well.
So nice.
And it's a good weight for that. Personally, I would want something a little bit heavier, but several people that I fish with would go the other way and put something like that Nautilus X-Frame on there. But it's a really crisp action on that rod. We kind of started, 8 weight is like the most common rod size for Alaska, I would say. And it's generally what we recommend for people if they're getting into it, want one rod to kind of do everything. But more and more, especially for our coho and king fishery, we've been fishing a lot of 9 weights.
Yeah, right.
That 9 weight R8 core specifically is just a really, really nice salmon rod. And it's for it's for casting dolly llamas.
Yeah.
It
Chucking
makes it
those things.
so much easier.
Yeah.
And that fly is just so effective.
Yeah. I had a Sage Method. Where does the Method fall in all this? I had a 7-weight. I think I got the 7-weight because I happened to buy it down south and it didn't have an 8-weight, but it felt like it was a 7.5 weight. It felt like it maybe rounded to an 8, so I didn't feel. That's my steelhead rod here. I've never really felt undergunned.
Yeah,
and there's some really big steelhead that no matter what you're fishing, they're going to be pulling. But
totally. The Method is on the very top end of what Sage calls fast. And Sage rods are already pretty fast, but I would say it's like a notch above the R8 Salt. So the Method became the Igniter, and then that rod is still in production.
The Igniter?
The Igniter, yeah.
And the word list.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's like every 2 years another something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one. It's more of a what you'd call like a specialty rod.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good for casting heavy flies or in the wind, but if you're not in demanding conditions, it's not that fun to fish because you still have to cast it, like you're fishing in demanding conditions. As soon as you slow down or try to relax, it just is really, really unforgiving.
Yeah.
Probably the closest rod to those super fast rods that we have is the new Winston Air 2 Max, which is a little bit of a departure for Winston. It's really fast, really powerful, really, really nice rod.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite part is these Cerakoils, though. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, wow.
But, kind of built for saltwater fishing, throwing in and out of boats, maybe, getting abused. Yeah, really, really nice. I've cast those and the R8 Salt next to each other quite a few times, and I want one of each. I'm all about collecting rods and reels, though.
You might as well. All right. Anything else about rods or reels? Closing thoughts.
Come in, cast them, figure out what you want. I'd say start off with an 8-weight probably. You're going to limit yourself to, more of the dolly and salmon fishing. It's a little bit too much for cutthroat, but that should be a catch and release fishery anyway. Right. So get an 8-weight, try catching kings. It's supposed to be a decent run this year. The forecast is around 6,000. So kind of like a couple years ago, assuming ocean survivability was good and everything. The coho run should be about as good as it was last year. And, that way you can learn the sport, you can have fun, you can fill your freezer, and then kind of start going down the road of like specialty tools, because you could have a bead rod, you could have a little trout rod, you could have a windy rod, a saltwater dolly rod, a king rod, a dolly llama rod. The options are endless.
Yeah, my Sage 1 was a 6-weight, didn't have the bigger fighting butt, but it was in 9.6 and it was perfect for fishing from drift boats with those, with an indicator rig and those kind of complex with the extra weight and just kind of a fussy sort of thing that you can get up, you can mend it really easily, you can reach. A perfect application for that. Up here, been great rod for trout, dollies, whatnot. But yeah, once you find that specific application, it really makes you want to buy something else for the other application.
Absolutely.
Start collecting them. Like the bass fishermen used to make fun of when you have all those on the professional bass tour and they got 7 or 8 rods in the little boat there and like, who needs that many rods? Well, fly fishermen do too.
Oh yeah.
So
totally. Yeah. And lines are important as well,
Yeah, you want to know the lines?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do that. Walk over here to the lines. This is where it gets pretty...
Gotta put your
crazy
science hat on.
Yeah, because you get the profile of the tapers and you have the running portion, then the shooting head, and it all just ends up being some sort of in your presentation, whether you're sinking, whether you're chucking, what you're fishing with. So do you really have to nerd out a ton when it comes to buying a fly line? Is there such thing as an all-around line? Because an all-around line might not be great for dry fly fishing like a dry fly fishing line, but it's not going to be good for a sink tip that you would want for streamers necessarily. So where are you at on all this stuff? Maybe let's just start from the Rio side here. We got the Grand, Indicator, Spey, Gold.
So the Rio Grande was kind of the all-around line. That's what we put on the Alaska Ready package. It does everything pretty well. What you want in an all-round line, well, first of all, almost everything we're fishing in Alaska is going to be a floating weight forward line. There are occasions where sink tips and sinking lines, obviously for your two-hand casting, but occasionally you want a sink tip sinking line for your single hand rod. Very, very specific circumstances, kind of thinking like swinging flesh in the fall on the Kenai or out in Bristol Bay. Most of our salmon fishing, the fish want to see the action. So it's not so much the darting motion of prey under the water, it's the up and down jigging. And if you have a floating line pulling a really heavy fly, you're going to get that much more movement in the water column. The Rio series, Rio Grande has been one of our most popular Alaska fly lines. The Rio Gold is kind of one of the more popular trout lines, just good all around dry fly line. It's not one of my top choices for most things in Alaska. Our flies are just too much bigger. Like, you can't really cast a mouse on a Rio Gold. You can do that with the Rio Grande. A fly line like the Predator or even the SA Titan Long is going to cast those big, bushy, wind-resistant flies even better.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the Rio Indicator, and that's going to be kind of similar to the SA Anadro Indicator. And these are just really, really long heads with not totally level floating, but the idea is you have more line to roll cast and you've got better control on your drifts, and yeah, you're kind of using it for nymphing and bead fishing.
Right. Good. Yep, just male. So you were mentioning the head length. So if we look at the Rio Gold versus an Indicator, the Rio Gold has 43 inches of running line, 43 feet, sorry, no different there. And then the head length is 47, and the body of that is 22 inches, whereas the Indicator's got a back taper of 16 feet, and then it's got 13 feet of body, and then 17 feet of a different body, and then a 6-inch taper, whereas the Rio Gold is just a lot more general. It's not quite as specific. And same thing with the Rio Grande. It seems like there's just a lot more detail put into specific parts of the head length in order to make it present flies, work flies, cast flies in the way that's desired.
Very much so. Yeah, that's where it can be a little intimidating for people, just because, they have to, I guess, guidelines for what grain weights go to what rods are kind of like not as clear anymore, because you have lines like the Predator, Rio Predator, or the Titan Long, very similar streamer lines, but they're heavy and they're built heavy. So the weight forward 8 weight is really a 10 weight, but it's already kind of done that math for you. A lot of people don't really like that, but especially up in Alaska, you got to think about what you're fishing with. And that's where your line selection comes in. If you're mousing, like, don't get a Rio Gold, get something heavier. I really like the Titan Long. The SA Infinity Plus is another one. It's a really, really nice line. And it's got a longer head for people that like to keep a little bit more line in the air.
So this is the Scientific Anglers.
Yes, yeah.
And all these have diagrams on the back, so you can kind of look at the taper of it and you can see the measurements of it.
Yeah.
And actually, this is kind of cool. The Rio has pictures of maybe the desired fish or like what you're fishing for on the front of the box. On the back of the Scientific Anglers, it's got type, species, and like temperature stuff. So it kind of gives you a guide there of what you're doing.
Yeah. Usually on each fly box, you'll find the grain weight, the head length, and then potentially the entire head weight, because the first 30 feet is kind of what the AFTA standard goes off of. But then it can change drastically depending on the taper. You kind of mentioned temperature. That's a big one that we get, especially here in town for people that have moved up here from warmer places. Definitely worth having a cold or a freshwater line. You know, freshwater lines can absolutely be used in the saltwater. It's more referring to water temperature. You know, if you bring a Rio Grande, you know, the Trout Series line down to somewhere really hot, it's gonna like melt almost, be totally not functional. And then conversely, if you have a tropical line and you bring it up here, it gets into cold water, it's not going to bend at all. It'll be brittle. So
you got 2 switch chucker series from Rio here, the number 8 520 and the number 6 420. What's the difference? What are the applications? And
so that line series it came out a while ago as kind of a do everything line. 2-hand overhead cast it. You can kind of throw your sink tip on and switch cast it. It doesn't do anything great, but it does everything fairly well without having to get, you know, 2 spools and then your shooting head system and then a single hand line on the other one. The switch indicator is another kind of single hand line. It's just a beefed up version of the regular indicator made for, you know, throwing big bobbers with your switch rod. Really good steelhead line around here.
Yeah. What about tips? How many do you have like a tip wallet in which you have a whole bunch of different ones? How often you switch them out? Which ones do you like to use, or do you just tend to use regular fly line?
You know, for proper Skagit casting, you know, I've really liked the Skagit Max Power heads. They're shorter, about 20 feet, and they match my cast really well. And they pair really nicely with the Mao tips, Rio Mao tips. The fishing around here, you know, there's some tips that work better than others, and you don't need to change so much. It's hard because when we're doing the 2-hand casting, it's usually in the saltwater, so your depth is changing, the current speed is changing, and you can't really keep up with it. I'd say probably the 7.5 float, 2.5 T, whether it's T11 or T14, are the most popular ones. The 5 and 5 can be good as well. But the cool thing about the Mao tips is once you've found the size that works well for the head you're using, your sink rates, you know, it's all the same weight. So it's not going to really change your cast that much. It's not like going from 10 feet of T10 to 10 feet of T18. You know, all of a sudden you're adding a bunch of grains, which you have to compensate for with your cast or your head size. The 2-hand head and tip system gets even more complicated. It's a lot of trial and error.
Do you have a lot of, I know on their website, there's an extensive like steelhead profiles and fish profiles. Do you have a lot of these setups of what to buy in these combos, or is it?
Kinda, I mean, we have a few, or we had a king salmon spay package for a little while. I think that was set up with like 650 and a 700 Skagit Max launch. And with that size, you know, you want the heavy Mao tips or just straight up T18, T20. It's not super common around here. just because the options are limited, and it's a little weird. I mean, it's fun, but none of our rivers are big enough to spay cast. So it's all fishing, tidal, ocean, which is like a big river, but it's hard to visualize.
Yeah.
Some of the
Same reads.
Funnest stuff for the two-hand casting around here is the kind of trout spay for dollies.
Oh, yeah. Leaders now. We got tapered leaders, looks like mostly 9 foot, got some 6 foot leaders in here. What's the difference between a 9 foot, 6 foot? Like, when would you want to? Is it all about presentation? Like, when are you, obviously with your dry fly fishing and there's spooky fish, you're going to want a much longer leader. Sometimes you go 10, 11 feet. If you tie your own leader, put more stuff on there. But what type of leader are you looking at for the cohos and the kings around here?
Most commonly, you're going to be in like the 9 foot, 20 to 12 pound. I generally steer people towards a little bit lighter leader, especially if they're using an 8-weight. Better to break off a fish than snap your rod. But your 6-footers and even shorter, that's going to be kind of more if you're fishing sink tips, sinking lines, swinging flies. A lot of times when you're spay casting, you're only using, 4 to 6 feet of level mono. The salmon steelhead leaders, you'll notice like the 8-pound salmon steelhead is thicker than the 3X, which is about 8 pound in the trout leaders. And really that is just for abrasion resistance on the beaches. So we use, even dolly fishing, I probably use salmon steelhead 8-pound more, and Maxima is my favorite tippet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was fishing this last June or whatever up here, and I lost so many flies behind me because the tide's low, and so it just gets caught on a barnacle, whatever. And as you come forward, you're not finding it. It's back there somewhere. You have no idea where it is.
So that's razor sharp.
But yeah, one of the ways that I actually broke a fly rod was during the back cast, got wrapped around, and I was using really thick leader. And as I came forward, it broke the tip of the rod, which doesn't happen often. They're supposed to be strong enough for that, but that's something that can happen. So that lighter leader to save your rod is probably
Yeah, that's a good consideration too. With the knotless tapered leaders, they're great. They turn over well, but once you've used up about 3 feet, they get thicker and stronger. So in my time guiding out in Western Alaska, I lost a few rods off the boat because clients were, using way too thick of a leader and hooked up and just like came around a corner at the wrong time and it got ripped out of their hands.
Yeah. It started off as 3X and now it's
50 pounds.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Let's walk over and I guess we're at waders now.
All right.
You got some Grundens here. And you got Patagonia, and of course you got Sims. I don't know if you're allowed to be a fly shop without Sims. I haven't, I don't know anybody who has the Grundens. Do they use the Gore-Tex technology?
They don't on all their waders. They do have a pair, the Boundary series, that we have not brought in just yet. I've been using those for about a year though myself, and
you like them?
I've been very impressed. Yeah, the Grundens kind of are the newest player in the game. Their Portal wading jacket just came out this year. It's got Gore-Tex on it. Their wading boot I really like because it fits a little bit wider. I've got a wide foot. And their Vector zip is probably, it's one of the more exciting waders this year. They came out with the Vector last year. Zipper is new, or was new last fall. And it's going to be a really good wader for Southeast Alaska. I feel how much more durable it is. It's got knee pads in it. So think about your average steelhead mission, how many times you're crawling under logs, through Devil's Club.
Yeah.
The Patagonia Swift Current, I love what they did this year. I mean, that is my personal favorite all-time wader. That's what I used to wear guiding. The suspension system is just unmatched, and they largely left it alone. Kind of very, very minimal updates. And the ones that they did do are extremely well thought out, like little loops on the suspenders for clip and retractors. You know, when I was guiding out west with the little ladder lock system, that's a great place to hang a GPS or an inReach device.
Right.
And they also have the knee pads in them, which it's nice.
Yeah.
It's as nice as the zipper.
Patagonia definitely seems like the brand that anglers will give you feedback about what little things will make the wader better. What is the most practical use? Grundens being new, but they have such a great reputation in the commercial fishing industry. You would think that this product is going to be really well made.
Yeah.
Might not have all the little features and whatnot, doesn't have the experience, but it doesn't seem like a new wader in the game. It seems like this is a pretty practical, pretty good.
Yeah, they're both like very, very well thought out. And, you know, for whatever reason, the Grundens boots are Vibram like the Sims boot, but the sole is really sticky around here in the saltwater and some of the slick rocks, coho fishing and king fishing.
And zippers, like the zip down, like that was always something great, but I never trusted it. Like after years and years and years, you're still good to go.
The only problem with getting a pair of zippered waders is you will never go back. It is just not an option.
It seems like even just to zip down a little bit while you're hiking, because you just generate so much heat while you're hiking, to be able to just maybe zip it down a little bit to let it breathe. I haven't gone to it yet. I have not taken the plunge.
Okay.
I am currently, well, not between waders, but I have a pair of Reddingtons that are about, those aren't, I wouldn't say disposable, but they don't have the same.
Yeah.
You're not going to have them for 5, 6, 7, 8 years of heavy use. Over to the Sims corner, a couple different varieties here, kind of a straightforward one. And then these are the G4s?
Yeah, the updated G4Z.
And what are we getting from the Sims?
So the biggest update on those is going to be there are interior pockets that are waterproof. Kind of feel inside there.
Oh, yeah.
And those are legitimately waterproof. And then the suspension system is slightly different. Kind of went more to like the drop down, not totally like Patagonia, but more similar than their old buckle system. Get a little net holder on the back, kind of shoulder blade yoke.
Yeah. Yeah. What about sizing? Because I could have sworn that I bought the same size of Reddington waders, but they're much wider.
Okay.
And is the sizing, sizing varies so much with some people's ideal of a large or a medium, even if they do have the numbers for inseam and for waist, like it can just be variable for whatever reason. So I guess for all three of these, how do they fit to size? Is one more snug than the other? What are you looking at?
The sizing can vary wildly. It's tough. You can get a fairly good idea, but Sims has probably more sizing options than the other companies. You know, Patagonia and Grundens both have plenty of options to fit. Sims, you know, being kind of the first to the party, has really, really dialed in like all the different sizes. And then they've got a custom store. So if you're into the G series, which is going to be the G3 and the G4Z, you can customize them even further, put like specific booties on. The Freestones now share a stitching pattern with the G3 guides, so the knees articulate a little better. And then the tributaries are going to be your like basic run-of-the-mill entry-level wader. They're probably going to fit the worst. They're just not, they're not really for anglers that are going to use them a lot. You know, think about like buying a season pass. If I get 2 to 3 seasons out of a pair of waders, I'm happy.
Yeah.
But I use them pretty hard.
Yeah.
And like we talked about, I'm not easy on my gear.
Yeah. There's a lot of applications for fly fishing, maybe down south, where you're going out on 10, 15 trips in a drift boat.
Right.
And you're stepping out to fish from shore a little bit, but you're not accessing through brush or under logs, over logs, Devil's Club, all
Devil's
that. Sort of
Club.
Man, those things.
Yeah.
You just get a perfect little spot where it just gets all the way through. And like, how? There's 5 layers. There's 7 layers or whatever stuff.
Yeah.
Man, brutal. Waiting staff. Do you ever go waiting staffs?
We have a couple waiting staffs, yeah. Got a couple Sims ones, and then the Patagonia, they are nicer. It's kind of one of those things like younger fly anglers don't want to admit that they need a waiting staff, but let me tell you, there are places where it is just so nice, especially steelhead fishing, because you walk so far. What's around the next bend, and high flows. Oftentimes, the best steelhead fishing is kind of as the rivers are coming up, and the wading can be dangerous. I mean, people definitely drown in waders. Yeah. So wading belt, wading staff, studs are huge.
Yeah.
They're kind of tough because, being in Alaska, a lot of boats, a lot of airplanes, pilots don't really like you stepping on their floats and studs, but felt is not an option here. So
yeah, the wading staff is I don't always have it, but it kind of depends on where I'm going. I bought one when I was in California on the Pitt River. A guide said, yeah, you should get one. Yeah, I'm not sure if and then I rented one for one day. And I thought, oh, for sure. This is so great. Even though it is not freezing, it might not be snowing. If it's 44 degrees and you're fishing that high water when it's coming up or dropping down, if you slip and then you flood the waders right off the bat, then your day is kind of ruined.
Oh,
then
totally.
You're on the clock. You're in the wader, in the water, you're cold and dry. But once you get the water in there, then you're in trouble. So yeah, I think the waiting staff is, I don't take it a whole lot, but it's definitely not a bad idea, especially if you're not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's good option. I mean, here in Southeast Alaska, moisture management is everything.
Yeah, for sure. Where are we at now? We need nets, maybe. Right over here.
Yeah, so nets have become
accessories part.
Very popular lately. Yeah, obviously, most fly fishing is kind of conservation minded, catch and release, and long gone are the days of like biting your rod cork and grip and grin. That's kind of not cool anymore, which is great. So all of our nets are rubber baskets. It's a lot nicer on the fish. And we have a whole host of different size handles, baskets. Probably our most popular one is going to be the Fish Pond mid-length boat net with the deep basket. It's the Wild Run edition. I like the full-length boat net myself. And, really, like, especially the Fish Pond bags, they have the net holsters. Right. You can carry a pretty big net around the woods, and it doesn't really get in the way.
Yeah, it nestles down pretty good. It does, and it doesn't like get over your heads where the net is in your face or touching your neck or anything like that, which is pretty nice.
Yeah. The Fish Pond for most stuff, Fish Pond is one of those brands that I don't know that they make any duds. Some of my oldest gear that has stood the test of time are the Fish Pond dry bags.
Yeah, you can look at these nets and you could think, okay, that's California, Sierra Nevada. That is brook trout on a lake somewhere. Like you can really see the application, and it's pretty obvious. Those are nice.
Yeah, the El Jefe is probably the smallest kind of all-around net. Still big enough. It will accept the deep mesh that they make. So you can still get a steelhead, big salmon in there. The other ones are more, trout, dollies, or for places in the lower 48.
Mm-hmm. All right, where else? Bags.
I
got a Fish Pond sling. Love it.
Yeah.
But when you put a whole bunch of stuff in there, you have your thermos, you have your water, you have your fly boxes. It can get a little bit heavy, and then at a different sort of angle, after a while, it gets a little bit tiresome.
Sure. So the cool thing this year, Fish Pond came out with the series, the Storm Shadow. It's that guy right there. And what that is it's not a submersible waterproof bag like their Thunderhead bags, but it's water resistant. So water resistant zipper, and then, still kind of waterproof exterior fabric. So if you're just trying to keep the rain off and everything, it's going to keep your gear, 90% dry.
Yeah.
And it's much lighter.
Yeah.
I also have Thunderhead sling, and yeah, like you said, some on the occasional days where it's nice and sunny and you don't need a rain jacket and all the gear, it's kind of a treat to carry less.
Yeah. I don't know how many flies that I've saved because the sling, you can sling it around in front and that becomes your little retying table. And so cold hands or whatever it is, you drop the fly and it drops onto the bag rather than into the water.
Yeah.
So that's really nice to be able to swing that around. And then also when you put the net back in there, you can just sling it around, net back in there. So it's super nice, but obviously there's different applications for different things.
Yeah, they've got, several accessories, whether it's water bottle, net holster, bear spray holster, and lots of different ways to configure it to you, whether it's the lumbar packs, the sling packs, the backpacks, if you like carrying a backpack. Critical piece of gear, though. Yeah. If you're going to be out fishing for a day, you got to have some way to carry all the things.
Right. I'm a much bigger fan of the waterproof zipper than I am the roll top. Where do you land on roll top versus zipper?
You can put more gear in the roll top, for sure. I would say that the waterproof zipper is a lot more convenient, but it's also more maintenance. So, with these new True Zip waterproof zippers, they kind of replace the T-zip with the teeth. You still need to make sure you have, your little kind of silicone wipes to keep the zipper operating smoothly. You don't want to overload it because then, in some instances you can pop it open, but I generally prefer the zipper myself because, part of the function of being a guide is to have everything. So if I have a big bag, I will fill it up. Always.
And last but not least, flies.
Yeah.
Plenty. How much is kind of preference? There's the idea that if you fish a fly that you believe in, you're going to fish it much better and be more aware of what's going on. So that might be as critical or close to as critical as fly selection itself. Where do you land on that?
I think that is pretty accurate. If you fish something confidently, generally, I think that you're going to catch more fish. I don't know why that is, if you're just fishing better or, maybe you think like, oh no, that's not a log or a rock, that's fish.
Yeah.
But there are times when they want what they want.
Right.
Last year, for example, we had kind of a unique couple week window where there was really good streamer fishing for dollies in the freshwater rivers around town, but they wanted pink clousers. Like, you could catch them on other flies, but, you could catch a lot on pink clousers. Steelhead patterns, we got a bunch of new flies in this year, some new aqua swinging flies. Color, motion is all good, depending on where you're fishing. Obviously, pink, black, and blue are very popular. And then the dolly flies, like bait fish, kind of little minnow patterns. It's interesting. It's unique because, down south fishing for trout using bait fish, you're kind of using more like small trout size flies. But the dollies, even though they're eating bait fish, it's all salmon. So the most effective patterns are crazy sparse. Then we have our kind of king salmon section, big, fluffy pink flies. Chartreuse works really well around here. Other side, we've got our big predatory trout, big rainbows, mouse patterns, and then flesh and egg flies. And eggs aren't quite as popular as they used to be now that beading has kind of become more mainstream, and places are easing restrictions because I mean, they do kill less fish.
Mhm.
Beating is just better for catch and release.
People get into the beading.
Oh yeah,
It is crazy. The bead phases. I mean, it's unbelievable. The
I'm
people that are into it there.
I'm one of them. I probably have $1,000 collection of
Man.
nail polish at home.
Yeah.
Drives my wife crazy.
Pretty crazy.
The smell.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Go out to the garage.
Yeah. Mousing up north, a lot of the stuff when people think Alaska, they think of mouse patterns for big rainbows and they think of beads, flesh flies, things like that. Whereas southeast, we don't have as much of that.
Right.
I know some friends who some of the smaller mouse patterns are getting some of those bigger trout, but you don't have those 30-inch resident rainbows.
No, that'd be nice.
So, yeah, it'd be awesome. And then also some of the the crossover type flies, like some of these over here in the king section, are some of my favorite ones for steelhead too, because it's just a kind of a similar, ubiquitous. Some of your intruders can work for both, which is awesome. So you can, like the pink squidrow. I like this guy.
Yeah.
He's been awesome sometimes. But yeah, you go back to the color thing. It's funny that for some reason I don't like the blue and chartreuse.
Okay.
But it doesn't make any sense because when I'm fishing for king salmon, if we're trolling, we'll use green hoochies.
Right.
Which, like, why can't you get over this, Jeff? And then also there's a difference too between what we see and what a fish sees underwater. So a lot of times it's not exactly what I might want. It's what the fish wants. But
yeah, I think that's an important thing to take into consideration when you're choosing flies as well.
Yeah.
The neat thing that we have also, aside from the occasional new pattern, that's one of my new ones for this year.
Oh, whoa.
Funky.
Yeah.
But we've got a whole selection of warm water flies for people maybe going to Christmas Island or going to the Bahamas, going to Belize, doing some tarpon fishing.
I wish.
Yeah, one of these years.
Yeah. This looks like a cross between a sea cucumber and a squid.
Okay. I was thinking
the sea squid.
Kind of polychaete wormy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Where's that guy go?
That guy is right there.
The cushy tushy.
Yeah, originally designed for cohos, but fished under a bobber, I think that would catch a steelhead or two.
How much traffic do you get with people that are going down to Belize and whatnot? So
kind of more and more, especially the local Alaska crowd. Send a lot of flies up into South Central for guys going down there. So, you think about it, Alaska, we're the closest state to Christmas Island, essentially. People in Midwest or East Coast, they can get to Bahamas pretty easily. But now that Alaska Airlines is flying to Belize City as well, those are two really good destinations that are easy for all of us to get to.
Yeah, I just need the time, just need the money. Two other variables. What else you got? Accessories, things that we didn't cover. What do people need?
Man, what do you need? Need a good box for all your flies. At least one. The Plan D boxes are some of our favorites. They hold articulated flies really well. Need a pair of nippers. Cut your line, after years and years of just chewing fluoro and mono with my teeth. It kind of hurts now. Need your split shot just in case. Pair of forceps. Generally, even when I'm fishing for fill in the freezer, coho fishing out in the salt, I'm fishing barbless hooks for the most part. So kind of getting in the habit of crimping barbs. Not just for the fish, it does make it harder to land them, but if anyone's ever stabbed themselves with a Dalai Lama, they'll appreciate the barbless.
Goes right on through. As far as your shot goes, what type of shot do you had? I think it was down in California and I was fishing down there, like the Dinsmore coated tin was kind of nice because it was tin.
Okay.
Not as heavy, but
where's
your shot?
We kind of got a few packs of the water gremlin left, but that is going away from what I understand. So we're Probably, the Danielson lead is going to be the most common. The Loon tin is really nice, but it is just not as heavy, and it's really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Deep soft weight. I don't know if you've ever used the putty stuff.
Oh, once or twice. Yeah, I borrowed some from a buddy.
That can be pretty nice. It definitely adds a little bit of weight to it.
Yeah.
You need to put it over something, though.
Yeah.
A knot, or, used to use twist weights occasionally. Haven't really seen those around so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indication or the application for the forceps important when you're putting your shot on, because if you keep sliding up and down, then you're moving it back and start to degrade the line a little bit.
Yeah, once again, another thing, probably shouldn't be biting lead too much.
Probably not recommended. No. Indicators, you got plenty of indicators here. It's good.
Bug spray, head nets, and insect repellent.
The low tide, man, they're so bad.
Yeah, we're kind of kicking around how we can do a little bit of like fly fishing king salmon derby this year, since it's supposed to be decent. But anybody that has fished in the area of Fish Creek where the kings are good in June knows that the no-see-ums, I mean, I don't know that I've really seen them worse anywhere else.
Yeah.
So if you forget a head net, you will only do it one time.
I've really tried to go with just coverage, because back in the day, growing up here playing Little League Baseball, you're something that was 5% DEET would keep them away. And now it's like 99% DEET. And that, again, is a lot of DEET and a lot of lead. That's probably not good long term.
No, so probably not.
Try to go with, just coverage, like putting on a buff or something like that, but any exposed skin. And then your hands just get covered, and then you're constantly scratching, and it's brutal.
Yeah. No, I'm still looking for something. Well, I'm sure you are in the same boat with your kiddo, but like, how am I gonna keep the bugs off my baby?
I know. I actually hadn't thought about that until just now, because she was born in September.
Yeah.
And so it was, you don't have a lot of mosquitoes and bugs out, but yeah.
I'm not about to put Ben's 100 on a 7-month-old.
Yeah. Especially with the soft spot. Does it absorb right to the brain?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? I'm not going to be the one that finds out.
No, absolutely not. What else you got for closing? What about glasses? What about the importance of wearing being able to see through the water, some polarized action?
Very, very important. Glasses are one of those things, even when it's rainy, the sun's not out, you want to be wearing glasses, especially if you're fishing indicator rigs. You've got the hook, you got the bead, you got the split shot.
Yeah.
Any of that can poke your eye, knock it out. So protection is one thing. But secondly, especially for steelhead fishing, our runs in the Southeast generally are not very big. So it's more hunting than it is just like fishing water, like you would down in BC or something. So walking slow, and if you can see into the water and spot fish before you start fishing, I mean, then you're probably going to catch them.
Yeah. You're looking for that little triangle that's the fin, that little bit of detail that you're not going to be able to see if there's too much glare you can't see down into.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Smiths and the Costas we have, the glass lenses are a little bit heavier, but they are so nice. But even the sun clouds, we carry those for people that don't want to drop $250 on a pair of glasses, and they're polycarbonate, which is kind of nice for like impact sports and everything, but they're fairly well, the polarization is pretty good I think they're like $55.
Okay. Yeah. The thing about fishing the tide too is the tide's coming up. If you do a lot of extra stomping around in that mud, then all of a sudden you create this huge, just muddy wake.
Oh yeah.
It's going down and hard to see. Do you find that the fish, like dollies, do they really care if there's a big cloud coming down? Do they kind of move out of the spot? Have you seen if they react to that?
I haven't really. I don't think that they do. They're so keyed in on the salmon fry, and part of that is motion, you know. So occasionally, especially here in the Juneau area, once the hatchery releases their smolt for the year, there are so many baby salmon in the water. I mean, it looks like it's raining even when it's not.
Yeah.
And occasionally the fishing can get tough because of that, just because, you know, what is setting your fly apart from another fish.
Yeah.
And in those instances, kind of like I used to do out in Western Alaska, if the water clarity is off or you need something to get their attention, like throw topwater fly.
Yeah. Great. Anything else?
I can't think of anything.
All right. Well, where can they can shop online?
Yep. Yeah. AlaskaFlyFishingGoods.com. Any questions, you guys can email us info@AlaskaFlyFishingGoods.com or give us a call. Our number's 907-586-1550. And here pretty soon we'll go back to being open 7 days a week as we get a little bit closer to full-on fishing season.
Yeah. And if you have a layover in Juneau, you can walk from the airport
super close
to the location. Yeah, you can hop right over here. I don't know why anybody would have a long layover in Juneau, but just in case.
It's always a possibility, you know. Lots of anglers are going to start heading to Seatuck here pretty soon, and then a lot of people actually come by as they're waiting to fly out to their lodge with Ward Air. So killing time, heading out to Pybus or Elfin Cove or something.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, man. It was good to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff.